Okay, we are now going to go through Module 2 in our textbook, and this is on terrestrial biomes. So we are going to be talking about what a biome is, and then what characteristics of what characteristics do each of the different terrestrial biomes possess. So one key point that I wanted to point out about terrestrial biomes here is that temperature and precipitation of an area determines the types of plants, and then because of whatever plants are there, that also is going to determine then what animals are going to live there. Okay, and so that's just a major point of terrestrial biomes. You should understand that. So looking at temperature and precipitation. All right, and so another key point with terrestrial biomes is that they have like organisms that live in these areas. Like these are two different types of cacti that live in Arizona, I believe. Oh no, one lives in Arizona, one lives in Namibia, but they actually have very similar characteristics. They even look very similar. And that's because they live in an area where there's the same amount of rainfall, same amount of basic like temperatures throughout the year. And so they've developed over time similar adaptations because they have similar selective pressures because of those physical conditions that they live in, okay? Another thing you need to know about terrestrial biomes is this map. You should be able to pick out different biomes. Like if I would say, where do we find tropical rainforests? You should be able to tell me like where on the map in general we find tropical rainforests. And with that one, you probably should even be able to give me an example of a tropical rainforest somewhere in the world. So make sure that you can do that. We'll talk a little bit more about that sometime in class. You should also be able to interpret the information on a climatogram or a climate diagram like we have down here. So spend a little bit of time going through these graphs. Basically what you see on this climatogram or climate diagram is in red. On this one, we see the average temperature throughout the year. This is January through December. And then in blue, we see and this is temperature in degrees Celsius. So don't get confused and think that it's -10 and oh, I must have the tundra because it's like an Arctic condition. It's not -10 degrees Fahrenheit, it's actually Celsius. So be aware of that. And if it says 25 degrees Celsius, you don't think it's also the Arctic because 25 is actually like room temperature. It's pretty warm. And then in blue, we have average precipitation in millimeters. So that's telling you the amount of rain and the amount or the actual temperature of an area over the year. That's what you're looking at here. Okay, then moving on, you should know the basic characteristics of these various biomes. So when I say characteristics, what I mean by that is how much temperature and what is their temperature throughout the year, what's their rainfall on average. And I don't mean, you don't have to memorize like the exact like millimeters of rainfall, but you do need to know that a desert has very little rainfall. A tropical rainforest, thus its name, has tons of rain. Grasslands tend to have seasonal rain events. So those are the sorts of things when I say no amount of precipitation. You also need to know in general what's the temperature throughout the year. Does it stay kind of a constant temperature like along the equator? Or do we have seasonal temperatures like in a boreal forest in Canada? Okay. Examples of some plants that live there, examples of some animals, and then different examples of those actual biomes. Okay, where do we find some of those biomes? Think about even the United States or in North America, where do we find those biomes? And so here are the different biomes you need to know. You might want to take a second and kind of write those down as you're writing the notes. And then this unit goes through all of those different biomes. So again, I'm not going to read all of that to you, but that is there for you. And then as we get to the end of this section, you'll notice there's some good questions again. So make sure that you're going through those questions. That's always a good thing to quiz yourself on or have somebody quiz you. And that is it for 1.2.